22 missed calls. That's what glowed on my screen in the harsh morning light, right when my parents' luxury anniversary cruise was due to depart, the one I'd paid for. The $12,000 one. The night before, my father's text had appeared, simple and brutal. "We thought it might be better without you." I didn't fight. I didn't plead. I just typed back, "Whatever you say." They mistook my quiet for surrender. But when the ship denied them boarding, they learned the true price of silence. This was never about the money. It was about what happens when the family fixer stops paying for the privilege of belonging. My name is Dorothy Hale. I've purchased family peace my entire adult life. Plane tickets, five-star hotels, elaborate holiday feasts. My credit card was a magic wand that made our dysfunction disappear. If I paid, we could all pretend. So when my parents' 40th anniversary loomed, I fell into my old role. I orchestrated everything. 2 suites with balconies, curated shore excursions, couple spa packages, even a pre-cruise hotel stay to spare my mother the indignity of an early morning flight. $12,000, one click. I told myself it wasn't the money. It was a gift. A chance, maybe, for us to feel like a real family again. My mother, Angela, worshipped at the altar of perfection. Her world was a stage, and she needed flawless scenes for her social media captions about gratitude and divine grace. My father, Raymond, was her dedicated stagehand, playing the role of the calm, reasonable man. His philosophy was simple: peace through silence, so long as no one disrupted Mom's narrative. My older sister, Avagda, was cast as the beloved, volatile artist, fragile and unpredictable, the sun around which we all were expected to orbit. And then there was Mia, just 16, still sweet, still clinging to the belief that family was a sanctuary. I remembered that belief. I used to cradle it myself. A week before the cruise, our family group chat went dead. No excited chatter about packing, no questions about documents. When I texted my mother directly, her reply was a vague "can't wait," followed by a heart emoji. Avagda offered nothing but radio silence. Even Mia, who usually bombarded me with memes and photos of potential outfits, stopped messaging altogether. This silence had a texture. It was hollow and heavy, like the air in a room just before the lights go out for good. I tried to chalk it up to pre-vacation busyness, to tell myself I was imagining things. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew. It was a warning. 2 days before they were set to fly out, I called my dad, as I always did, to confirm the itinerary. His voice was breezy, unnaturally bright. "We went ahead and booked our own transfer to the airport," he said. A cold knot tightened in my chest. What transfer? The pause on the line stretched, long enough for the awful truth to take solid, undeniable shape. "We thought it might be better without you," he finally said, the words dropping like stones. I stared at a blank spot on the wall, letting them land. Better without me. After all of it. The phone fell from my fingers onto the sofa. Miles, my boyfriend, looked up from his book and read the whole disaster on my face before I could make a sound. I didn't scream. I didn't weep. I just retrieved the phone, found my father's text thread, and sent my 2-word reply, "Whatever you say." I didn't sleep that night. Those 2 words seemed branded onto the back of my eyelids, glowing even in the dark. I had funded the entire fantasy, yet I remained the expendable character, the piece that didn't fit in their perfect family portrait. Every few minutes, my phone would illuminate with old, saved messages from my mother: "Don't forget sunscreen, darling," or "You're my best girl." Each one now felt like a careful forgery, a strategic deposit of affection made to offset the coming betrayal. The digital clock read 6:13 a.m. I moved through the quiet kitchen on autopilot, the grind of beans and the drip of coffee the only rituals that made sense. The house held its breath, accompanied by the refrigerator's steady hum and the soft, metronomic tick of the wall clock. Miles leaned against the counter, his gaze a silent anchor. "Did they give a reason?" he asked, his voice low in the stillness. I shook my head, watching the dark brew fill the carafe. "Only that it would be better without me." He let out a slow, measured sigh. "That's not better. That's cowardice." I didn't argue. I just turned to the window, watching the sunrise bleed color onto our quiet street, painting the asphalt in slow, indifferent strokes. A lifetime of smoothing over their cracks, of patching the holes they made. This time, I thought, maybe let them face the flood. By 7, the phone shattered the quiet, not with repentance, but with demand. The voicemail notification popped up. My mother's voice, sharp as shattered crystal, strained through a veneer of tears. "Dorothy, this is insane. They won't let us board without the cardholder. You need to call them. Right now." I took a long, deliberate sip of hot coffee. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "I don't." The calls came in relentless waves until, after the 22nd, I answered. "Dorothy?" Her voice was a frantic wire, buzzing with fury. "We're standing at the terminal with our luggage like common criminals." I tapped the speakerphone icon. Miles appeared in the kitchen doorway, arms folded across his chest, a silent sentinel. "You should have considered that possibility," I said, my voice unnervingly calm to my own ears, "before you decided I wasn't necessary." "You are humiliating us," she shrieked, the sound tinny and distorted through the speaker. "No," I corrected, the word flat and final. "You did that to yourselves." I ended the call. 3 hours later, the assault on the front door began, a thunderous, impatient pounding that made the wood frame shudder. I stood at the top of the staircase, looking down at the blurred, shifting shapes behind the frosted glass. Miles materialized beside me, his presence a solid warmth. "Do you want me to get it?" he asked. "No," I said, my eyes fixed on those ghostly figures. "I want to see their faces." She exploded into the foyer first, a tempest of expensive perfume and incandescent rage. My father trailed in her wake, a shadow in his familiar role of appeaser. "This is beyond childish, Dorothy," she spat, "not even a hello. Do you have any concept of the humiliation you've caused?" "I believe I'm starting to," I replied from my vantage point on the stairs. My father raised his hands in that universal gesture of forced calm. "Now, let's everyone just take a breath. We need to talk this through." Talk. Their favorite word. A synonym for "you will listen, and you will concede." When Miles stepped down, barefoot and utterly composed, my mother's fury pivoted to him with lethal precision. "Ever since she's been with you," she seethed, "she's changed. Cold. Distant. Calculating." Miles didn't blink. "Leave," he said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the weight of stone. You don't get to insult her in her own home and still expect her to clean up your mess. For 30 solid seconds, silence swallowed the hallway. Even my mother was stunned into a temporary halt. Then, with an incoherent mutter about ingratitude, she whirled around. The door slammed with such force that the pictures on the wall rattled. The quiet that rushed in to fill the space they left was different. It was dense and complete. It wasn't the pause before more noise, it was the sound of something structural giving way, and the new, permanent silence that settles after the collapse. For 3 days, a thick, oppressive silence filled the house. It wasn't peaceful, it was the heavy, charged stillness that presses down before a storm breaks. No calls buzzed. No texts chimed. Just a dense, anxious waiting. I tried to focus on work, but every ping from my laptop, every creak of the floorboards, felt like an echo from a past argument, a ghost of a guilt trip. Miles moved through the days quietly, his presence a steady counterpoint to the tension. He didn't fill the space with platitudes. He just kept making coffee for 2, placing a fresh mug beside me every few hours. It was his silent language. "I'm here. You're not alone." On the 4th morning, the siege began again. The phone erupted, vibrating across the wooden table with a frantic, repetitive urgency. 22 missed calls. A digital monument to their panic. I watched it dance, screen flashing with their number, and I did nothing. On the 23rd ring, I answered. "Dorothy." My mother's voice was a shard of glass through the speaker, sharp, desperate, stripped of its usual performative grace. "They won't let us on the ship. The cruise line says the cardholder has to be present. In person." I set my coffee mug down with deliberate, theatrical slowness. "Funny," I said, my voice flat. "Since you all decided it would be better without me." "This is not funny," she hissed. "You are making us look like absolute fools." "No, Mom," I replied, the words cool and clear. You managed that all by yourselves. I flipped the phone face down on the table, cutting off any response. Miles, leaning against the kitchen counter, met my gaze. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips. Consequences, he said softly. I gave a single, firm nod. By noon, the doorbell announced their retreat from the port. Its ring was aggressive, prolonged, a demanding electronic snarl. I didn't move from my post at the top of the stairs. Through the frosted glass of the front door, their silhouettes were familiar tragicomic shapes. My mother, rod straight, vibrating with indignant tension. My father, a slumped shadow behind her, already radiating the weary regret of a failed campaign. Are you sure you want to open it? Miles's voice was a low murmur beside me. Yes, I said, my eyes not leaving the blurred figures. I want to hear the script this time. She didn't wait for the door to be fully open. She barreled in, a storm of humid frustration. Her carefully styled hair was fraying, and her lipstick was slightly off-center, a small but telling crack in her facade. Dorothy, do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice trembled, not with sadness, but with pure, undiluted fury. They treated us like frauds. Do you understand? There was a scene. People were staring. I kept my arms crossed, a barrier against her heat. Maybe next time, I suggested, my tone almost conversational, don't actually commit fraud with a credit card. Her eyes flew wide. What did you say? You used my card to fund a trip from which I was explicitly disinvited. That's theft, Mom. By definition. My father stepped into the fray, hands raised in that familiar, pacifying gesture. Sweetheart, please. Let's all just calm down. We need to talk this through. There it is, I cut in, my voice slicing through his. The magic word. Talk. Which really means sit quietly while you explain why I'm at fault for your actions. My mother's composure finally splintered. You humiliated us, she cried, her voice breaking with a wounded pride that felt decades old. We're your parents. I know, I said, the anger gone, replaced by a cold, simple clarity. And you made sure a whole cruise terminal full of strangers knew it, too. Miles descended the stairs then, soundless and barefoot, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. His utter, unshakable calm acted like a bellows on my mother's rage. Ever since she started up with you, she snarled, directing her vitriol at him, she's changed. She's become hard. Cold. He didn't rise to it. He just offered that slight, infuriatingly calm smile. She just stopped paying the admission fee for her own humiliation. The words hung in the air, stark and undeniable. For one suspended second, there was no sound. Then, with a furious, inarticulate mutter about disrespect and ungrateful children, my mother spun on her heel. The door slammed shut behind them, a final, percussive punctuation. This time, the silence that rushed in felt different. It wasn't heavy with dread or charged with impending conflict. It was thick, yes, but with a new quality, calmness. Reality. It filled the foyer, steady and whole. I felt no flinch in my soul, no aftershock of guilt. This silence wasn't an ending. It was a foundation. The one I should have poured for myself a long, long time ago. 3 days of absolute, echoing quiet. Then, on the 4th night, my father's text appeared, a stark line of black on white, dinner. Just you. Need to talk. No preamble. No, I'm sorry about how things went. It was not an invitation. It was a court summons. I showed Miles the screen. I'm going, I said. But I'd like you to wait nearby. Just in case. He studied my face for a moment, then simply nodded. No argument. No list of reasons why it was a trap. He understood the assignment perfectly. This wasn't about him saving me. It was about me knowing he was within sight, a lighthouse on a steady shore. He knew the critical difference between swooping in to rescue and simply standing by, present and unwavering. The light on my parents' porch was aggressively cheerful, a bright, false beacon that felt staged, like the floodlights before a tense interview. Inside, the scene was meticulously set. The good china, the linen napkins folded into precise peaks, the silver polished to a cold shine. At the center, the bottle of wine I'd gifted them last Christmas, now uncorked and breathing. The symbolism was not subtle, my past generosity, recycled to facilitate a new transaction. Avagda greeted me first in the foyer, her smile a tight, practiced curve that didn't reach her eyes, the same expression she reserved for awkward funerals and professional headshots. Mia was already at the table, her gaze fixed on her lap, her shoulders hunched with a fatigue that seemed deeper than physical. My mother made her entrance, a swirl of hostess energy and floral scent, every gesture broadcast for an invisible audience. My father assumed his throne at the head of the table, hands folded neatly, his face arranged into its most convincingly reasonable mask. We performed the ritual of small talk. Sentences launched with hope fell like stones into the space between us, each one landing with a palpable thud of awkwardness. I ate a few bites of the roasted chicken. It was perfectly cooked, and it tasted like nothing. My father cleared his throat, the universal signal for the end of the opening act. He leaned back in his chair, adopting his let's be logical pose. A real shame about the cruise, he began, his tone light, as if discussing a rained-out picnic. But, the family unit still needs its bonding time. We've been proactive. Found an incredible deal, a beautiful resort in Arizona. 5 nights. World-class spa, infinity pool overlooking the canyon. He painted the picture with bland, sales brochure words. My mother seamlessly took her cue. She slid a glossy, full-color brochure across the polished tabletop toward me, her movements those of a luxury concierge. We thought if we all contributed, she said, her voice sweet with manufactured consensus, it would be so much easier for you to manage. Easier for me. The old, familiar code. The burden disguised as a favor. The invoice for my own inclusion. I kept my face a calm, blank page. Who's handling the deposit? I asked, my voice devoid of inflection. My father chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Oh, we're not details people. Avagda jumped in, her voice syrupy. You're the organizer, Dorothy. You always have everything under such perfect control. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The script was so familiar, so brazenly unchanged, it was dizzying. My eyes flicked to Mia. She hadn't lifted her head, but her lips were pressed into a thin, pale line of defiance. Her whisper was so faint I almost didn't catch it. They won't stop. Ever. My mother's head snapped toward her, the pleasant mask slipping. Mia, that's quite enough from you. The sound of my chair scraping back against the hardwood was loud and final. I'll think about it, I said, the words neutral, offering nothing. Stepping outside was like breaking the surface after being underwater. The night air was cool and clean, scoured of the house's cloying perfume and unspoken tensions. Miles's car was parked across the street, a dark silhouette with a single patient silhouette inside. I slid into the passenger seat. He didn't ask, how did it go? He just put the car in drive. We rode home in a silence that was not empty, but full. It wasn't the painful, brittle silence of things unsaid that had filled my childhood home. This was the protective, understanding silence of shared space. It didn't hurt. It sheltered. The next afternoon, it appeared, a gift bag on the front doorstep, its gold foil garish in the daylight, a white ribbon yanked into a severe, perfect knot. A bribe wrapped as a present. I carried it inside, set it on the coffee table, and simply stared, as if waiting for it to reveal its own nature. Miles looked from the bag to my face. Do we perform the autopsy, he asked, or just state the cause of death up front? I reached in. Inside was a thick, creamy envelope, the familiar glossy resort brochure, and a printout of several pages. At the top of the first sheet, in stark font, booking confirmation. My stomach dropped like a stone. 5 nights. Villa suite. Panoramic desert view. Primary guest, hail, Dorothy. I turned the page. My eyes went straight to the payment summary. The last 4 digits of the card on file, 1174. My card. They had gone into the account, retrieved the details I'd used for their doomed cruise, and charged it again. The air rushed from my lungs, not at the dollar amount, a figure I could absorb, but at the breathtaking audacity of the act. The message was screamingly clear. Your resources are still ours. Your consent is an afterthought. Miles walked back in from the kitchen, a glass of water in hand, and immediately read the storm on my face. "What's in the box?" "They booked it," I said, my voice strangely detached. "With my card. It's non-refundable." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on me. "Okay," he said finally, his tone soft but focused. "So, what do you want to do?" I shuffled through the papers. The check-in date was this very weekend. The reservation was in my name. My financial footprint. My digital signature. It represented an obligation they'd tried to force on me, but it also held a seed of authority. My responsibility. But also, for the first time, my potential power. "They're waiting," I said, the realization crystallizing. "They're sitting at home, waiting for me to get the email panic, to call the resort, to cancel everything and eat the fee. To fix it. To swallow it whole." Miles didn't blink. "So," he said, the words simple and profound. "Don't fix it." It was like hearing the definitive click of a lock disengaging. A door inside me, long barricaded, swung open on silent hinges. We packed with a lightness that felt illicit. Sunscreen, novels, sunglasses. No elaborate plans, just empty space to fill. I forwarded every confirmation email to my own account, building a new digital file, my resort. My booking. My paid invoice. The receipts in my phone folder no longer looked like evidence of a crime against me, but like tickets. Like permission slips. The flight was a short, sun-drenched jump. Stepping out of the airport, the Arizona air wrapped around us, dry and warm as an open hand. The resort lobby was a cathedral of calm, soaring glass, native stone, the subtle scent of citrus and clean linen. The woman at the reception desk had a smile that reached her eyes. "Welcome, Miss Hale," she said, and the way she said my name, as simple fact, without subtext, without a hidden invoice, made a tight cord of tension at the base of my skull finally unravel. She handed over 2 keycards. The entire process took 10 minutes. In a decade of orchestrating family travel, it was the fastest, smoothest check-in of my life. It felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity. The villa was a quiet marvel, better than the curated photos. A private terrace framed a breathtaking stage of rust-colored cliffs and endless, burning sky. A small, jewel-like plunge pool shimmered. A wooden bowl held sun-warmed oranges. Sheer curtains breathed in and out with the desert breeze. Miles dropped our bags and let out a low, appreciative whistle. "This is spectacular." I looked around at the space, paid for with my money. Chosen under my name. A grim, rightful smile touched my lips. "It should be," I said. "I bought it twice." For 2 days, we practiced the art of nothing. We walked a dusty, winding trail fragrant with sun-baked sage. We ate ripe figs and yogurt on the terrace, observed by a still lizard who seemed profoundly unimpressed with our existence. We napped in the broad daylight, curtains wide open, the desert sun painting shifting shapes on the walls. The phone stayed in airplane mode, a silent, inert brick. In that digital silence, my own nervous system began to unclench, recalling a rhythm older than alerts and anxieties, the rhythm of real quiet. On the 3rd morning, I switched the phone on. The cascade of notifications was immediate and violent, a flash flood of digital sound and light. Missed calls. Text bubbles stacked like accusations. Voicemail alerts blinking red. The first message to fully load was from my mother. "Are you actually at that resort right now?" The one below it, from my father. "The front desk is saying the villa is occupied. You need to handle this, Dorothy." Then another from her. "You have humiliated us all over again." The lexicon was familiar, selfish, dramatic, spiteful. One message from my father attempted a different, weary key. "Your mother is very upset. We never intended for things to go this far." A period for finality. But they had gone precisely as far as their choices had paved the way. Next, I played the voicemail. Her voice was breathless with outrage. "They refused to give us a key. They say the reservation is exclusively under your name. This is cruel and vindictive, Dorothy. Call me." I watched the desert light move across the tiles for a long minute. Then I opened a new recording, held the phone to my lips, and spoke. My voice came out steady, measured, a tone I'd never mastered in her presence. You committed fraud with my credit card. This is the consequence. Do not contact me again about this. I ended the recording, sent it, and placed the phone face down on the cool stone table. It felt, for the first time in years, like a tool, not a leash. By noon, the battlefront had shifted to the public square of social media. My cousin Natalie posted a picture of my parents, Avagda, and a few aunts and uncles gathered around a picnic table, glasses raised. The caption read, "Family first. Always. No room for drama, only love." In the comments, someone, a family friend, asked, "Looks like fun. Where's Dorothy?" My mother's reply appeared within minutes. She chose to distance herself. We're not sure why. She's been very different lately. A familiar ache started in my chest, but it wasn't the sharp sting of betrayal. It was the dull, heavy weight of her predictable narrative. Instead of pain, a weary, almost peaceful calm settled over me. Let her have her performance. The audience was waking up. Then a separate, quiet ping. A message from Mia. No words at first, just a single, sad face emoji. Then a second message. "I'm so sorry." Attached was a photo, a screenshot of the old, detailed cruise itinerary I had crafted months ago. At the very top, highlighted, was my name and the label, Primary Booker and Payment. Below it, a line-by-line breakdown of every cost I had covered. It was a forensic exhibit of my financial sponsorship. Her next message followed. "I'm telling everyone the truth." My thumbs hovered over the screen. "You don't have to fight my battles," I typed back. "Please protect your peace." But the dominoes were already tipping. Aunt Diane, my mother's skeptical sister, sent a direct message. "Dorothy, your mother says you're causing a scene over a shared vacation. Is there a receipt you can show me?" Within the hour, two of my cousins, people I rarely heard from, sent similar inquiries. "Hey, is it true your parents used your card without asking?" I felt no rising heat, no urge to scream into the void. I felt a strange, clear-headed purpose. I didn't write long defenses. I didn't editorialize. I simply opened my digital folder, selected the relevant, time-stamped documents, the booking confirmation with my card details, the non-refundable policy disclaimer, the payment receipt, and forwarded them, one by one, to each inquiring address. With every press of send, a weight seemed to lift from my core, as if I were exhaling a breath I'd held for decades. Facts required no hysterics. They simply were. And facts, I was learning, did not tremble. By evening, the family group chat, a channel I'd muted years ago, exploded. My phone screen flickered persistently with over 36 new messages. I didn't open it. I could imagine the symphony, flustered justifications, tactical deflects, the wounded tones of people rewriting history in real time. I poured a glass of sparkling water, the bubbles fierce and clean, and walked out onto the terrace. The canyon walls were melting from ochre to a deep, burnished gold. Miles joined me, his presence a solid warmth beside me. We watched the sunset in a comfortable silence that said everything. After a while, he spoke, his eyes still on the horizon. "You know what this moment reminds me of?" he asked. That scene where the schoolyard bully is mid-taunt, and then he notices the principal has been leaning in the doorway, watching the whole thing. A real smile, light and effortless, touched my lips for the first time all day. "And the principal," I said, "is the unbreakable terms and conditions." "Exactly," he nodded, a satisfied glint in his eye. The next morning, a blocked number lit up my screen. It called twice, went to voicemail. On the third attempt, a cold curiosity made me answer. "Dorothy." My father's voice was a study in cautious diplomacy, each word chosen and placed like a chess piece in a losing game. We didn't anticipate this reaction. Your mother is very upset." "You spent my money," I stated, refusing the labyrinth of reactions and feelings. "It's been a misunderstanding," he offered, the word flimsy. "You assumed our plans were an invitation to conflict." I let the silence stretch, forcing him to sit in it. "You assumed my silence was permission," I corrected, my voice flat. "It wasn't." Another pause, heavier. Then the carefully crafted non-apology. "We're sorry if things were misunderstood." There. The classic pivot. Regret not for the theft, but for my inconvenient comprehension of it. I didn't argue. I didn't accept. I simply said goodbye and ended the call, starving the script of its next line. By noon, a thick, cream-colored envelope appeared, slid soundlessly under our villa door. The paper was expensive, the address my name in my mother's looping script, the ink a little less sure than usual. The card inside bore a generic watercolor of flowers. Her message was brief. We never wanted this rift. We only ever wanted to feel valued. We're sorry if our efforts crossed a line. No enclosed check. No offer of restitution. Just a plea for emotional amnesty, a wish to reset the board to its old configuration, my wallet open, their forgiveness on standby. I placed the card on the dining table, a museum piece of missed points, and went for a long, solitary swim in the plunge pool, the water washing away the last residue of their words. 2 days later, we returned home. Crossing the threshold felt different. The air in our house was just ours, clear, quiet, unhaunted by the ghosts of past arguments or the musty scent of obligatory guilt. I made coffee. Miles tended to the fiddle-leaf fig in the corner and put on a crackly vinyl record of surf guitar that sounded like endless summer. As dusk settled, the first fissures in the family edifice became public. My cousin Natalie, who had posted the family-first barbecue photo, now shared a vague, artsy quote about smiling faces with forked tongues and trusting the truth you feel in your gut. I noticed my mother's lifelong best friend had, conspicuously, not liked her last 3 perfectly curated posts. Then, a final message from Aunt Diane flashed on my screen. You were always the grown-up in that room. You deserve peace. I told them. Full stop. My father's digital silence was profound. He had a history of going radio silent when the spotlight of truth got too hot and close. The call from Mia came later that night. No, hello. Just the soft, shaky sound of her breathing for a few seconds, then a whisper that was also a declaration. They told me to block your number. I deleted the message instead. I sank onto the sofa. Mia, you don't have to. Yes, she interrupted, her voice firming, finding its steel. I do. I'm spending Christmas with you and Miles. If the invitation's still open. A warmth, profound and healing, spread through my chest. It's more than open, I said, my own voice thick with an emotion I didn't have to hide. This is your home. After the call with Mia ended, I opened the digital folder on my phone one final time. There they were, the receipts, the confirmations, the stark statements, a mosaic of little rectangles that documented a decade of purchasing a counterfeit version of love. I scrolled past them. Below, I had saved new photos, the resort's orange gold light, the limitless desert sky, a picture of my own feet, relaxed and still, at the edge of the private pool. I saved these images to the same folder, not as evidence for anyone else, but as a new ledger entry for myself. A record of what peace, bought and paid for with my own terms, actually looked like. That night, lying in bed with the window open to the cool, indifferent air, I understood the war was over. It hadn't ended with a spectacular explosion or a tearful reconciliation. It ended with a line drawn in the sand that did not wash away. The money they had taken had been transformed, alchemized into my own profound quiet. The silence in my life was no longer their weapon. It was my sanctuary, and it belonged entirely to me. 3 months have passed without a word. No urgent, guilt-tripping calls. No manufactured crises. Just a deep, continuous silence. The kind that isn't empty, but full of space for my own thoughts. Life developed a new, gentle rhythm. I began waking without the familiar anvil of dread on my chest. I could make morning coffee without drafting defensive arguments in my mind. When I opened my banking app now, I'd smile, not at the balance, but at the quiet story it told. Every subscription my own, every charge a choice. All transactions were mine. In February, Mia arrived for a 2-week stay, her duffel bag bursting with hoodies and her laughter a bright, if slightly nervous, sound in the hallway. We painted the living room a soft, warm terracotta while Miles curated a soundtrack of vintage soul records. We didn't dissect our parents' actions. Some fractures don't need to be picked at, they simply need the clean air of distance to begin healing. One evening, as we washed brushes, she asked softly, "Do you think Mom genuinely believes she's the good guy?" I considered it, watching the paint swirl down the drain. I think she believes whatever narrative allows her to sleep at night. For some people, comfort is indistinguishable from love. Mia nodded, her expression wiser than her years. "I used to think being family meant you forgave everything, no matter what," she said. "Now I think it means you don't allow the everything to keep happening." In that moment, I saw it. She had arrived at the same shore I had, but she'd gotten there faster and with a lighter pack. She was braver than I'd ever been. When she left for college, she hugged me so tightly the breath left my lungs. "Thank you," she whispered into my shoulder, "for making a place that feels safe." I sat in the parked car at the departure curb long after her flight vanished into the clouds, and I cried. The tears were hot, cleansing, and entirely joyful. By spring, the social media whispers and coded familial warfare had faded to nothing. My parents' accounts went quiet, no curated family photos, no inspirational quotes about forgiveness and unity. The pristine facade had finally shattered, and maintaining the illusion seemed to have lost its appeal. I learned that peace isn't merely the absence of noise. It's the profound relief of ceasing to explain your own heart to people dedicated to misunderstanding it. Now, when asked if I miss my parents, I tell the truth. I miss the idea of them. The polished, fictional version I funded for so long. I do not miss the reality that only ever took. The true loss was never the cruise or the $12,000. It was the years I invested in the cruel economy of believing love was a debt to be paid through suffering. Miles and I now facilitate a small, informal group at the local library we call Boundaries and Balance. It began as a dark joke and evolved into a monthly gathering for people learning the same difficult grammar we were. We talk about guilt, obligation, and the radical notion that peace isn't a selfish act, it's an act of survival. Sometimes, after these meetings, I'll sit by the large library window with a cup of tea and remember the Arizona sky, vast, unwavering, and magnificently indifferent. That's the shape of freedom, I realize. Not dramatic. Not loud, just ordinary, steady, and earned. If you have ever been the designated glue, holding together a structure that was determined to collapse, I see you. There is a fortitude in your quiet that they will never understand. And perhaps, in that silence, you will finally hear the sound of your own life, waiting for you to claim it.